Most welcome everybody to this seminar today on the topic on why Ireland's electricity system is not breaking down. We are very happy to do this together from the Swedish Wind Energy Association together with Enterprise Ireland. And I think this seminar is extremely topical. If we look at where the Swedish discussions is right now, we have a situation when we want to duplicate the Swedish electricity system in basically less than 20 years. And how are we going to do that? And securing that it is robust? How do we learn from other parts of the world? And Ireland is an exciting example with a little bit of a different electricity mix, but still technology there that I think can be very useful for the Swedish context as well. So from my end, I won't talking long today. I'm just very happy to have you all here and also everybody that is present online. And a special thanks to you, Alexander, in advance for great preparations on this seminar from Enterprise Ireland, and a special also thanks to all the guests that will take part in the panel today, not least from Maja Lundbäck, who is from political advisor to our Deputy Prime Minister, Ms. Ebba Busch. And also of course, to our Irish friends who has managed to fly through the difficult weather and arrive here in Stockholm on time to be here today.
Thank you, Daniel. So, yes, Daniel said, my name is Alexander Ohlman. I'm a clean tech and energy specialist with Enterprise Ireland here in Stockholm. And for those of you who don't know, Enterprise Ireland is the Trade and Innovation Board of the Irish government. And we help Irish companies to start, scale, and globalize in global markets. And this smart grid topic is something we've been looking at for a couple of years. It's something we have identified as kind of a key Irish capability, world-class capability. And we also think this is a great export opportunity for Irish companies. So very welcome, everybody. Great to have you here and those online as well. And we hope you find this an informative session. And yeah, we very much welcome questions towards the end of the panel discussion as well. But before that, I'd like to hand over to Maja Lundbäck, who's political advisor for energy for the Deputy Prime Minister.
Many thanks for having me here. It's really an honor to be here and talk about development of our power system and the fossil-free transition we are now aiming for in Sweden. I am representing the Minister of Climate and Enterprise. And I am, as Alexander just mentioned, the energy advisor for the Deputy Prime Minister and also the Minister for Energy, Business and Enterprise. As we have all known, and as that's the great topic of all European agendas, all European countries' agendas right now, is the green transition. We must go there, but it's not only for the green transition as well, it's also to make sure that we have a security of supply as well. We have an energy war now in Europe to have our self-sufficient energy supply within Europe and within our countries is on the really high matter of our government right now. And we need to do this transition. We need to strengthen each part of our power system, production, grid and consumption to meet the demand. And we need to look into the production mix and energy mix we have, both when it comes to energy, electricity, but also when it comes to where we are placing the new electricity production that is needed to meet our demand. We have some forecasts, analyses showing that we need more than double of the energy we have today. And as I can say, and the Swedish energy system is quite large as it is, and will be even larger. And this is also really important to make sure that we are secure in this new geopolitical arena we are seeing now with the Russian invasion on Ukraine and this war in Europe. It is really important now when we are stepping ahead and moving forward to expand our power system, to do this acceleration even further, that we also make sure that we can be safe. As I said, all fossil-free energy producers are needed. Wind power has a large share in the Swedish power system right now. As we speak, I think it's a little bit more than 4,000 megawatts of total 46,600 megawatts in Sweden right now. So it has increased a lot the last 5 to 10 years, and this is an expansion we are really are really welcome, because what we need now is clean and cheap energy as well. And now we need to make, and stepping forward here, to make sure that the wind power as a large producer can have a clear and defined role in the power system as well, because this will be the wind power, the share of wind power in our electricity system will increase a lot in the upcoming years, and we will need it more even further if we're looking into our forecast as well. And wind power as a relative new large producer in Sweden, Swedish power system development can be done to make sure we can use the existing and new wind power in a more efficient way. This must be the focus now, and to do this, knowledge and sharing experience with other countries and with other stakeholders, it's much, much important now. So this seminar is really welcome from our point of view, to make sure that we can share experience between Ireland and Sweden, to make sure that we can develop and enhance our technology development when it comes to renewables and especially wind power, and integrating them in the power system. From my personal experience, I have had the opportunity to work with the Irish TSOs and EirGrid and also Sony, and I have really always appreciated it. It has been really good to have that, because Ireland is also a small country, quite isolated island as well, and also had this really progressive way of tackling dynamics, stability, and also how to enhance a secure operation of the power system while integrating renewables. And to have that kind of experience in the European cooperation of NSOE, and to make sure that that can be shared in a high level, but also in this kind of way, these specific seminars, is really unique, and that is highly appreciated. And from my own personal view, I have always appreciated the discussion which we have in common when it comes to the dynamic stability and how to operate quite small areas as well, if you compare it to the Central Europe synchronous system. So many thanks for that, and that's make it a little bit extra special to be here today. And even if our power systems have some differences, we can always share and take inspiration, of course. And the need of expanding our power system, as I have mentioned, I will mention it again and again. And the need of accelerating our journey for our green transition is more important than ever. So closer cooperation right now is not only for gaining our climate target that we are reaching for net zero in 2045, but also to make sure that we are a united Europe with solidarity, and make sure that we can develop our country and keep on the good cooperation and the democracy we are so highly valued in this European Union. Many, many thanks for this. I'm looking forward to listening to this seminar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maja. That's very interesting to hear that this is a topic that's relevant to the Swedish government's priorities. So thank you very much for being here and for delivering the speech. And unfortunately, the ambassador to Sweden from Ireland has to send his apologies. He wasn't able to make it this morning, but instead we'll have an address by Hannah Fraiser from Enterprise Ireland. So welcome, Hannah.
Good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to be here this morning, and delighted that we're collaborating with the Swedish Wind Energy Association on this event. As Alex mentioned, unfortunately, our minister was not as successful as getting into Sweden yesterday, and our ambassador has had to step in at the EU informal this morning, so he does send his apologies. But I hope I will capably fill his shoes. And to introduce myself, I'm director for the Nordic region with Enterprise Ireland, and I, together with the team, lead Enterprise Ireland's activities across the Nordic region. As Alex mentioned, our ambition as an agency is to accelerate the development of Irish companies in world markets, and we can't do that without partners. And Irish people feel very at home here in the Nordics and in Sweden. We share common values and a desire to strive for continuous improvement and excellence. We have shared values in how we engage internationally, and we are highly open, export-driven economies. Our mutual interests and values are reflected in the Irish government's Nordic strategy, which is the first strategy for the Nordic region and sets out our ambitions for deeper engagement with this region to 2025. And our trading relationship with Sweden is very strong and growing. The Nordics are in fact the fastest growing region for Enterprise Ireland supported companies last year. This is our home market within the EU, socially, culturally and geographically close. And Sweden is a natural trade partner for Ireland as we look to build towards a more sustainable and safer future together. And I think we have a huge amount to learn from each other. And one area, the topic of this morning, where Ireland has overcome many challenges not yet faced in Sweden, is in the area of smart grid technology. Ireland's not blessed with the hydropower resources available here in Sweden, but nonetheless, we have increased its share of renewable energy generation through intermittent wind power. Our aim as a country is to generate 80% of our energy from renewable sources by 2030. In fact, Ireland will overcome Denmark in the coming years in terms of the contribution of wind power to the energy mix and will be a net exporter of electricity. To address the challenge that transmitting renewable generated power places on the electricity grid, Ireland has developed a regulatory framework and market for selling balancing and grid stability services. There are many companies in Ireland supplying solutions servicing this market who are well positioned to bring innovation to Sweden as this market matures. As Sweden continues its energy transition with an increasing share of intermittent renewables, electricity grid capacity problems are emerging. This has, as I understand, been the subject of much media attention in recent months. To combat this challenge, investments in electricity grids, as well as smart grid solutions, may be required. And both of these are areas where Irish companies have world-class expertise. You will hear today from Ireland's transmission system operator EirGrid, as well as private company VIOTAS. VIOTAS is an Enterprise Ireland supported company and represents one of the most innovative Irish companies emerging from Ireland today. We wish them every continued success. I will conclude by reiterating that Ireland and the Irish government is fully committed to supporting Irish companies and to deepening our political, cultural and people-to-people ties with Sweden. The promotion of renewable energy and green technology is very much part of this. I want to once again thank the Swedish Wind Energy Association for organising this seminar with us and pay huge tribute to my colleague Alex Ohlman, who has done all the work on our behalf. And I look forward to a really informative and engaging panel discussion. So thank you.
Thank you, Hannah, for those kind words. So without further ado, let's move on to our main event, which is the panel discussion. So I'd like to invite Magnus, our esteemed moderator, to deliver a short intro, and then we'll bring up the panelists as well. So welcome.
Thank you, Alexander. Hope you hear me well here, and good morning. And great thanks to the hosts to really focus on such an important area of keeping the lights on. I mean, how do we balance the grid and keep the balance all the time, even during disturbances and even with an increasing amount of wind in the system. And thanks for the great introductions here by our friends from Ireland and from the ministry here in Sweden. Yes, I would like to say that it's not easy to run a power system. It's something that really needs a lot of expertise. It's one of the most complicated systems made by the humans. And I would say balancing is getting more and more important in the introduction of more wind and solar in the system. We can't just operate the system as we have done before. We need to increase expertise. We need to and understand the challenges going forward. In the Nordics, we are blessed with having quite a lot of hydro. If we look at the present status right now, hydro is producing around 11,000 megawatts, and the total is the double, 22,400 megawatts. And we have a little bit of export. So with hydro, we can counterbalance wind variations. We can also have an instantaneous inertia that we also have in nuclear and other sources. We can actually also have it partly in wind if we design it correctly. As already said also, we have an electricity demand expecting to increase and actually to double until 2045. We see that electrification of industry and transport are the main changes. This will also have opportunities like hydrogen we see coming in industry, where we have an energy storage opportunity. We also know that transport is to a large extent using batteries, at least for cars and smaller devices, and that could also have an inherent flexibility that can be used. In Ireland, in lack of hydro resources, you must rely on other sources than hydro for balancing. And it's remarkable that the EirGrid group can handle currently, as to my understanding, up to 70% variable renewable power in the system at any time. That's quite extraordinary. We can, I've seen up to 50% in Sweden, but Ireland is ahead of us, handling 70%, which is quite impressive. And I think you have done an operational trial for 75% with successful result. And this is claimed to be the world first. And you are now aiming to gradually come to 95% to 2030. I mean, instantaneous operation. It's not for the full year, of course, but it's impressive that you can operate for 95% in 2030 then, hopefully. And yes, this is something being an origin or the basis for this discussion, I would say. I mean, what can we learn from you there in Sweden? I mean, I know Sweden fairly well, and we have colleagues from Jesper here from National Grid, for example. He would know more or less everything, and Maja, of course, and others. But we would like to understand what can we learn from Ireland, and maybe you can also learn a little on the other direction. But it's mainly, I think, the learning from Ireland over to here. And the focus, just to be clear then, it's on the short time frame. It's really how to keep the lights on, how to keep the system running. And we focus mainly on contingencies. I mean, something can happen anytime. For example, a big nuclear power plant can trip anytime. The biggest, I think, is now out of operation, so that one can't trip, the Oskarshamn 3. But if that is running, you have 1450 megawatts that suddenly can just disappear in the production. And then suddenly something else will kick in. And what happens then is that the inertia in all other rotating masses it's kicking in that power, not exactly up to 1450, because the demand is also going down a little when the frequency goes down. But in principle, that's how it is. And you can also have the other example where you have the two new-built HVDC cables out from Norway to UK and Germany. And if you have export, which is more or less the normal thing, and then you can lose 1400 megawatts instantly. And I think we had an error in one of the systems some week ago where it's actually reversed also, but that shouldn't happen. But then you have to cope with kind of a lost demand in the Nordic system of 1400 megawatts suddenly. And of course a lost injection at the other end of 1400 megawatts. And that should also be handled. So it's quite challenging. And you need to recover, keep the frequency. I mean, frequency is following, the variation in frequency is following the balance between production and demand. So that's really important. And we have seen a gradual decline of rotational energy in the the Nordic system, I would say. Particularly during summers, because we get nuclear and other devices offline because of, refueling and maintenance. And we get more solar and wind in, and at least with solar you don't have any rotational energy. You could add batteries, of course. With wind, you normally don't get it, even though there's something spinning. But maybe the wind people will disagree. But it's not on the same level as having synchronous or rotating masses. But to be positive and looking forward, we have also, as I already mentioned, we have a lot of tools for handling this balance. We have flexible demand, probably the cheapest to utilize. We have batteries, could also be quite cheap if you already have them. You can also buy dedicated batteries, synchronous compensators, which are actually generators or motors, maybe it's better to say, just spinning with rotating masses, adding rotational energy, or you can have something, different names, but synchro converters, doing the same with power electronics and batteries. Of course, there might be unexploited generation that could be used. I mean, that could be kind of activated to balance the system. Oh, I could talk a lot, but I'm just a moderator, so I should introduce the real expertise here. And I start with the head of future operations. That's a good title, Eoin Kennedy from EirGrid, because we are really looking into the future here. So, most welcome. I will ask you, Eoin, to tell about how balancing has been handled in Ireland and how balancing ancillary services markets have evolved and how these are designed. It's a long question, but feel free to introduce us into the Irish grounds.
Yeah, I'll do that. Magnus, look, delighted to be here today as well. I suppose when we look back at the kind of journey that we've been on in Ireland, it started really back around 2008, because at that time the government made a decision to aim for 40% renewables by 2020, with almost all of that expected to come from wind power, and that's the way it materialized as well. And wind, as kind of Magnus has indicated there, it's a non-synchronous source, so connected through power electronics, and when you've got a lot of power electronic connected resources on the system, it changes the characteristics of the system quite considerably. So I suppose in terms of the Irish system, just to give you a bit of context, and I'll talk a little bit about the journey we've been on and where we're going as well, but it's about a 7 gigawatt system, all Ireland, so Ireland and Northern Ireland. It's 2 different jurisdictions, but one single electricity market. We have a minimum demand during the summer of around 2.5 gigawatts, and currently we've just over 5.8 gigawatts of wind generation connected. That's quite, when you compare the size of that wind compared to kind of, lower demand periods, it's quite considerable. And we're a relatively small system, but it's also an island system, so it's a standalone synchronous system connected through HVDC interconnectors currently to Great Britain, but in the future, over the course of this decade, we'll have an interconnection to France as well as a further one to Great Britain. So going back to where we come from, and we established a thing called the DS3 program, which was delivering a secure, sustainable electricity system, is what it stood for. And really the purpose was to kind of look at the challenge from a whole range of perspectives, kind of technical, commercial, regulatory, and it set out a program of work for the course of the decade that covered a whole range of areas, things like, how grid code would need to evolve, obviously the system services arrangements as well that we put in place, the new flexibility services that were introduced. So we introduced a range of new services and increased incentivization for those services, things like inertia, fast frequency response, ramping kind of products as well. And that's been a big success. And we've, I suppose, also done other things like introducing new control center tool technology. So I think some of the earlier speakers mentioned dynamic stability, and that's obviously a key area for us to be able to manage. And we introduced a tool into the control centers which can do that assessment in real time, but also in a look-ahead way. So it's almost like a radar looking ahead at what you expect the schedule to be in the future. And it'll highlight issues and allow controllers to kind of take action ahead of time if needed. Other things we did obviously was to kind of enhance our modeling capability. But before we undertake operational trials, we do quite extensive analysis to make sure that whatever change we're making to how we operate the power system can be done in a prudent manner. And that's an important piece. And so, like Magnus mentioned, the 75% trial, 75% variable renewable generation trial, which we completed last year successfully. So we're now operating at 75% or up to 75% of our generation coming from non-synchronous sources, kind of predominantly wind generation at any given time. And I suppose one of the key inputs one of the other kind of things that's interesting, I suppose, is kind of stakeholder engagement. This is kind of it's a transformational change for the whole industry. And one of the things we put in place was an advisory council. So Paddy Finn, who's here, would have represented the demand side, for example, on that. We would have had regulators sitting on it, the government departments, renewable industry representatives, a whole range of different areas, academia, etc., that would provide kind of advice and guidance as part of that transition as well. So looking out to 2030 then, we're looking at 80% renewables by 2030, which is, predominantly going to come from kind of wind, solar generation, onshore and offshore. That's a big challenge that's ahead of us, a huge program of work. In EirGrid, we set out a new initiative about a year and a half ago called Shaping Our Electricity Future, which was looking across the challenges across 4 dimensions, kind of the kind of grid infrastructure side, the kind of markets, the incentivization side, system operations, and then engagement, because engagement is a key part, I suppose, of delivering grid infrastructure. And that program of work is something we're kind of actively looking at. It was based on 70% at the time because that was what the government targets were, but now they've gone up to 80%, so we're reassessing that at the moment. But look, that's a kind of a short history there, Magnus, of that. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Eoin. To my understanding, you have a strive to kind of engage investors and resources in the power system for your needs. So could you maybe tell a little more about you created the balancing and ancillary service markets in Ireland? If you
Yeah. So back around 10 years ago, we kind of did a lot of kind of long horizon kind of studies looking at the technical challenges that would arise, and then designed a number of services around those those challenges to kind of respond to them. So like internationally, sometimes they're called ancillary services. In Ireland, we call them system services, but things like an inertia product, which is trying to incentivize the provision of inertia at low megawatt output levels, so that you create that headroom for renewable generation. Things like fast frequency response, which is really the provision of a response after a disturbance within a very short time scale. So we've incentivized down to 150 milliseconds. And we've introduced a whole range of other services, and over the course of the last number of years, the kind of incentivization in that market has gone up 4-fold, from around 60 million as it was in the middle of the last decade to 235 million now, and that's had a great response. We've had a large number of batteries connect, for example. We've had large amounts of demand response providing services, a whole range of other service providers as well. Recent connection of a synchronous condenser by the market as well. So it's been a fundamental kind of enabler of the success to date, I'd say.
Okay. I think we can thank you there, and we will certainly come back with additional questions from the others here and maybe from the floor. So thank you, and we introduce your maybe closest. Sorry. Okay, please come up, everyone. Thank you, Alexander. Very good. I think we should have you, Jesper Marklund from Team Leader Balancing Market at Svenska kraftnät. Maybe you're the closest correspondent to Eoin here, yes. To maybe give some education, we can say, on how is it in Sweden, and maybe you can even comment on some differences with what you've heard and so far and so on. Sure. Just make a brief introduction. I mean, some people here would know more or less everything, almost like you, but some would know less. So you can try to put us on some kind of a basic level. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me, and good to be here. Very interesting to hear on the Irish case. So my name is Jesper Marklund. I work at the Swedish TSO, so Svenska kraftnät, with the development of the balancing markets. So I focus primarily on FCR, or frequency containment reserves, but of course I have some knowledge of the other reserves as well. So on the Swedish case, I'd like to start with saying that, so as you also mentioned, Magnus, we are part of the Nordic synchronous area. So when it comes to balancing, it's primarily a Nordic issue or a Nordic solutions and Nordic cooperations, I would say, rather than Swedish national solutions, even though we have some national solutions to some of the markets. But primarily it's a Nordic issue, and we have common balancing and system services throughout the Nordics. So if you, I will not go into detail on every single one of these services, but I will just spend some time going through them. So if you go from, like I would say, the fastest, then we have, as you also mentioned, FFR, or fast frequency reserve, in the Nordics, which serves the purpose to handle disturbances in a very short time frame, and quite small volumes also of delivery compared to the other services, just to handle that first instant of the disturbance in the grid. Then it comes to frequency containment reserves that are a bit slower, but we also have, and they serve the purpose to sort of contain the frequency deviation, so sort of stop the change of the frequency, you could say. There we have two different kinds, so we have FCRD and FCRN. FCRD is for disturbances, and FCRN is for the normal operations. And then going to the even slower services, we have the frequency restoration reserve, so the FRR. Those serve the purpose to restore the frequency up to 50 hertz again. There we also have two kinds. We have the AFRR with automatic activation, and we have the MFRR with manual activations from the control center at the Svenska kraftnät. So those are basically the main services that we have containing the stability and the balancing in the system. I could just mention that, as we've also said before, hydro is for sure the main provider of those services in the Nordics. Especially Norway and Sweden has a lot of hydro, obviously. And that has been the case looking back, and also we foresee that hydro will serve a main role in those kind of services going forward. That said, we from the TSO side, we really see the need for and the potential for new kinds of providers. So not least wind, that is increasing a lot. We see a great potential for wind to deliver even more system services, but also obviously batteries and other kinds of vehicle to grid, demand response, etc. A great potential for new kinds of services, even though hydro will continue to serve a main role, I would say. Yeah, that was a short introduction.
Yeah, at least for me it was very clear, so thank you, Jesper. Yeah, maybe we should dwell a little on the issue of differences, or issue on the topic of differences between Ireland and Sweden here. And to my understanding, there are markets for these services in Sweden as well as in Ireland. But do we have any differences in the market setups? I mean, in Sweden, it's more or less, if I remember right, Jesper, like 2 days ahead you can get your price, but you don't know anything in the future. I mean, that's more or less the same on the spot market also, if you don't hedge the price. But in Ireland, do you have like, Eoin, do you have like auctions, or you get like a known remuneration? I mean, if you're going to invest in something big, like, I don't know, synchronous compensator or something, like some beautiful device, I mean, how would you know that you will get the money back? Is there a difference between, or some other investment?
Yeah, I think looking over the current arrangements that were put in place in the middle of the last decade, it was based on what we call a kind of a regulated tariff arrangements, where there was a price set, and it was, I suppose, price regulation. So people had a good understanding of what they would be paid if they provided these services. So things like the inertia or the fast frequency response were very much based on that, and it's been quite successful. As I said, we got a lot of response from the market. As I mentioned already, the batteries, demand side, etc., that have come through. There's over the last year or two, the regulators in Ireland and Northern Ireland have been, I suppose, coming up with a new design, moving towards greater level of competition, so bringing in kind of competitive markets, and that process is ongoing at the moment. So there's a lot of activity there, and it's still kind of in detailed design, getting underway. But that's the kind of direction of travel.
So if I get it right, the direction is going more towards the kind of Swedish kind of case where you don't know anything in advance. You know, like 2 days ahead at most. I mean, going from like guaranteed income or revenue to kind of a more free market for these services then. Is that correct?
Yeah. So in some cases it could be day ahead type of markets. In other cases, so one of the things we're bringing forward at the moment is something we call low carbon inertia services, which is really looking at getting inertia, reactive power, kind of short circuit contribution. So effectively what we're trying to do over the next few years is kind of be able to to be able to operate the power system at close to 100% power electronic connected devices. So to do that, we need to be able to operate without our big synchronous generators. And if we take those off, we've got to replace the services we previously would have got almost as a byproduct of the energy. So things like inertia and reactive power, etc. So we are consulting at the moment on putting in place a longer-term fixed contract for some of that provision, with a kind of a set amount to be procured in Ireland and Northern Ireland. So it does sort of depend on the on what it is that we're trying to get, and the regulatory framework at the moment is allowing for that. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I think, thanks a lot, Eoin. Good to have that said. And I would like to hand over to you, Paddy Finn, here from VIOTAS, CEO of VIOTAS. You're working with enabling flexibility mainly in I think it's correct to say, you can tell yourself, but in existing resources to make them active on this market. So maybe you can give your experience in Ireland, and I know that you have actually looked into the Swedish market also. You are working globally, so you have quite some insight in Sweden. Maybe you can reflect upon the differences between Ireland and Sweden.
Perfect. First of all, thank you very much for having me here today. It's great to get to join the panel members. So I'm the CEO of a company called VIOTAS, and what we specialize in is trying to use existing resources on the power system to bring them to bear on balancing services, etc. A lot of that would be large industrial customers that we can use to balance the grid, but I suppose that's our key focus. But as a business, our key strands are, we have dispatchable services from demand. We have, and that's in both directions, so we can reduce demand, but we can also increase demand at times of very high wind resources on the system. We also provide 24/7 services to about nearly 300 megawatts of utility scale batteries on the system, so we help to support their day-to-day operations. But our main focus then is around high-speed frequency response. So I guess if we look at our capability, if we look at a power system, whatever the mix is on the generation side, you can be guaranteed that there's 100% demand on the opposite side. It's just a given. That's why the generation there, it's its reason, etc. So if we can try to use that resource and bring it to bear on balancing the power system, it can be it's a plentiful resource, but it's also quite cost effective. It's not good at everything though. So if it's very heavily utilized, your pool shrinks. But what it does is it can provide a very good value where you're looking at contingency services. So basically, where they're high in magnitude, but they're rare in occurrence. That's where it can play a very strong role. As a business, we operate in Ireland. We also operate in Australia, and that's grown faster for us than Ireland would have. Now we're starting to operate in Texas. We're just about to start in France as well. So we do internally in the company have effectively global scans, and we have kind of our little briefing documents on various markets. But if we look at, just to give you an idea of kind of performance here, so in Ireland, for example, if we have a trip on one side of the power system, we can be shutting off and have shut off, let's say, cement factories and large-scale refrigeration. And the timing of this is power plant fails, cement factory, cement mill goes to zero demand in about a quarter of the time it takes you to blink your eye. So that's the kind of speed of response that we're talking about. And our deployment cost is about less than 1%, it's about 1/3% of that of deploying batteries for the same use. So I guess when you look at where the strength is there, is that this really shouldn't be used for regulation. Batteries are very good for regulation, but if you look at the procurement of services on a power system, if you take a histogram of what's likely to fail, right, in terms of, if you look at your interconnectors, etc., your largest single in-feed is very significant in contrast to your regulation requirement. So if you build large-scale battery assets to meet your contingency requirement, you've really overbuilt on high-cost assets for very rare occurrences. And the thing is, in terms of, like, we also have to be very mindful of, we might have the money to spend, we can spend on the batteries, but is it the best use of those resources? So it's effectively, there's a global market for the resource requirement of batteries. So if we are effectively using them not for their best purpose, then we're taking them away from where they can be used for their best purpose elsewhere. When we look at, so in Ireland, Ireland was a great market to stimulate demand response participation, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't have its challenges as well. So there's still some market design issues that are challenging, where we would say that there's some market design cues that we can take from Australia, certainly as a market, which is interesting. And you talked about the kind of frequency of auctions. So Australia is a 5-minute auction. So we are bidding right up to delivery, just minutes before delivery in Australia with auto bidding systems, and that's quite in contrast then to some other markets. But that works very favourably for demand response, because you have the best knowledge just before what's about to be delivered. But I think it's very important that, as you know, when we talk about technology neutrality, and I think a lot of TSOs talk about technology neutrality, but I think that's often mistaken with, we need to talk about being technology inclusive, because technology neutrality often means that as long as you act the exact same as a power plant, we don't care what you are. But we actually have to realize that we're not going to get the characteristics that we used to get from power plants. The thermal plants were fantastic in terms of they were all encompassing, they were highly available, they gave us inertia, they gave us energy, they gave us full predictability, they were, everything. But now I think that when we look at bringing new resources onto a power system and embracing new technologies and even new sources of generation, we have to split up what the problems are. So we have to look at contingency regulation, over frequency, under frequency. We need to look at the time horizons associated with them and break those down into separate products and services. And that's what's key, because that then allows the best technology to be used for the appropriate problem that we're actually dealing with, as opposed to saying that we just want a technology that solves everything, because then I think it causes the need for overinvestment. And sorry, then back to here with Sweden. So if we look at the stimulation of the market in Ireland, so the 700 odd megawatts of demand response, with some of the market challenges, it leads to an event where it's about 1/3 of that is available on average. But that's, there's changes coming that will allow that to grow now quite significantly. But what really stimulated the development of the market in Ireland is what remains as the kind of what would have been our obstacle for investment here, which is the requirement for the demand response provider to be a balanced responsible party. And that challenge, that was alleviated in Ireland in 2012. So the mechanism to be able to be a demand response provider in Ireland was enshrined in the codes from 2007, but this requirement remained until 2012. So there was zero growth of demand response, and then 2012 that changes, and it just ramps, because we're very different in nature to the existing utilities. So we're effectively a utility company, yet we were awarded a title of Ireland's fastest growing technology company in 2019, which is a world away from your typical utility. So we just, in terms of, we need to bring that type of company, that type of mentality to bear. You need to decouple it from the requirement to be, let's say, a balanced, responsible party in that kind of traditional, in that traditional sense, and that certainly worked in Ireland, and we've seen it work in other markets as well.
Yeah, I will bring you another question, but you have to wait for the two Swedes here before you answer. And that's more or less what you see that could be kind of improved in the Swedish market, making you interested to actually enter the Swedish market with your company. But I think we're a little running out of time for the two colleagues here from Sweden. So I would like to introduce, but thanks a lot, Paddy. Very clear message and very good. Per Larsson, you are Director Planning and Optimization Nordic at Vattenfall. And Yes, I think we don't need to introduce Vattenfall a lot, but you have a lot of different resources like nuclear, hydro, and as well as wind, growing wind, and heat, and pumped hydro even. And I think, do you have a pumped hydro? Yes, maybe in Sweden or not. Or maybe
Sorry?
pumped hydro.
No, we are investigating.
You're investigating.
Bringing one old one back.
Yeah,
operation.
right. Yeah, okay. Anyhow, yes. How do you see on this? I mean, what are your reflections from what you've heard?
Yeah, first, thanks for having me, and very interesting to hear about the development in Ireland. So, just short, what I do is I'm responsible for the production planning for the Nordic assets in Vattenfall. And going forward, I think what's most important for balancing the system is that we have it's not one single technology, of course. There will be a need for super fast resources with low energy components and up to multi-day and weekly flexibility with large energy components. And I think what's important is to have a versatile portfolio that will make with overlapping capabilities. This will make us more resilient to different changes in the system that is hard to foresee now. There is room for all technologies, and we should make sure to make the best of the ones that we already have. And as Maja said in her opening speech, now with wind being such a large player, it's even more important that we make use of all the good capabilities that wind actually has. We have a long history of delivering these services, and as Jesper said, it's been from hydro. We are active in all ancillary markets and with a fairly large market share as well. We already delivers ancillary services, MFRR and FCRN from wind already today, and has been doing that for quite some time. But going forward, I think for wind, we are now, and we and a lot of other wind operators are in the process of pre-qualifying their assets for delivering all these assets. And wind is actually one of the few resources that is able to deliver more or less all these resources that on all the markets that we have. So from the super fast FFR, FCRN, FCRD, AFRR, MFRR. And whether they should be used for all these, that's a second question, but they have these capabilities. And I think what first comes into mind when it comes to wind is the down-regulating products, of course. You can down-regulate when you have a large production, but soon, if it's not already happening, I think we will see also up-regulating products in situations where you have very high wind power in the system. You will voluntarily curtail your wind parks to be able to up-regulate, because that could be more profitable. In such situations, typically the spot price could be very low, and then you could make more money, to be honest, to delivering these services. Consumption, of course, is very suitable for up-regulating products, shutting off the consumption. Batteries, I think, will focus on the very fast products. You will have the new industry processes with electrolyzers and hydrogen will also probably be able to deliver on all these services and also have the capability of large-scale moves of volume, making it a competitor to hydro. To sum up a bit, I think that all the new flex, if I may call it so, have the opportunity and will most likely also take a large market share of these fast products, the capacity products, whereas the hydrogen, hydro, large-scale consumption, new industry process and so on probably will be more used for the ones with more energy deliveries, and also perhaps is better used for day ahead and intraday re-optimization to also meet the big balancing need that inevitably will come with this large share of intermittent power. But in the end, all the market participants will evaluate where their product is needed the most, because that's where they get most paid for providing these services, and they will move between these different value pools. And as we have all seen now the last couple of years, the volatility in spot prices has been extreme, and this will also spill over to the different ancillary service market, and it has already. So it will be crucial to be able to quickly move between the different markets to help out balance the system in the best way possible. Yeah, I think that's my take on this so far.
Thank you, Per. A lot of different solutions and different markets to adopt for the technologies. Thanks a lot. And finally then, Jonas Sunryd, you are at Ellevio Energy Solutions, Senior Business Development Manager, and you are having a 500 million Swedish crowns investment to be materialized in the next years. So you're one of the big players. I think it's mainly in batteries, isn't it?
Yes, right now it's mainly in batteries.
So would you have any comments or advice?
Yes, to start off, thanks for having me today. I was really looking forward to hear about Ireland's experiences. I was really, it has been a tremendous journey that you've done, and I think there's much reflections that we can do as well. And as Jesper said, we also have the integrated perspective that we also coupled to Nordics. But just a few reflections on my behalf. And seen from our perspective, we own infrastructure. Primarily today, it's stationary batteries that we invest in. We have a portfolio right now with 10 megawatts, but we also have a few projects that's coming in the next 2 years. And we see, of course, we see that as you said, Per, we have to have seen from a system standpoint, we have to have diversified. I think Paddy, you were into that as well. We have to have a well diversified portfolio of flex resources, where of course every participant is looking for the best and optimal price, where they could get the most profit out of that. And I think from our point of view, we think that it's important, of course, to see the value stacking opportunities in batteries, but you also see that there's other ways, of course, than batteries. We have other reasons. I think we'll get back to that later on, but that's a few points from mine. I also I looked into the DS3 program, and then I think there's some key points there to dwell more into and learn more about on those experiences that you have. I mean, from the Swedish perspective, I mean, you have I think close to 2 gigawatts stationary batteries, perhaps.
Yeah, or about 600 megawatts installed, but there's a huge amount that's looking to connect as well, and yeah.
So I think there's lots to learn from a Swedish standpoint.
Thanks a lot, Jonas. Finally, if you can just say maybe one sentence on your kind of thinking after what we have heard on the issue, on the topic, on what the Nordics can learn, or Sweden in particular, and from Ireland, and possibly vice versa also. And Paddy, you can take also with you the question I sent to you, that I mean, what would you see that can be improved in the Swedish setup here with your Irish perspective?
Yeah, so I think it's about disaggregating the services and breaking down in terms of granularity of exactly what's needed. And we'd like to see nearer-term procurement, so that's where near-term procurement to delivery. So that's where we target the markets that we go to next, is actually really where that's happening and what we'd like to see there. And also, again, that link to the balanced responsible party is key. But I definitely think that, from the DS3 program, I think was a real world-winning program in terms of what was achieved, and in terms of what was done in terms of like increasing the rock-off levels that the system operates at, etc. I think that was very important, and then recognizing that the money is moving into faster and faster services as well. That's a good stimulation signal sent out to the market, to, let's say, the battery providers, the smart grid operators, etc. as well. So certainly we would like to see that we will be able to take part independently in the market without that balanced responsible party need would be key.
Oh, thank you, Paddy. Okay, we are a little running out of time, so make it very quick. Eoin, thank you.
The thing I'd say in terms of learnings is that it's really a holistic approach. And if you look at our Shaping Our Electricity Future Roadmap, which is looking to 2030, it's crossing multiple dimensions that have to be considered. So that's one thing I'd say. In terms of what we can take from the Nordics, Nordics have a huge amount of interconnection, lots of high ramp rates. That's something that we could learn from as well, and how that's managed. There's been a lot of electrification here in terms of EVs, etc., and how that's, as a system operator, how do you integrate that into your renewable, into your forecasting, demand forecast, etc. is something that we could take from here as well. So there's a lot of learnings that can go either way, I suppose, is the point. Yeah.
Yeah, Per. Any more to add, or are you maybe you're happy with what you said?
I think it was interesting. I think you mentioned that you have a market for inertia, for example, and we quite recently in Sweden has introduced the FFR market, and it's due to the lack of inertia. Then I think it would be wise to consider also to create a market for inertia, or a combined FFR and inertia market, because if there is a market, you could also provide inertia in situations where you wouldn't provide those services on the spot market, for example. And and I think also that was one of the conclusions from the governmental assignment that SVK had a couple of years ago on new ancillary services, to look into the inertia and FFR market, how that could be developed. And I think that would be good if in situations when there is low inertia, we could utilize the inertia that is actually could come online if it's profitable.
Okay, thank you. Jesper?
I can just say that we are looking at that kind of product, so it's on the way. Most likely. I could just say also it's very interesting to hear, as you say, how you've done that with the inertia product. And I could just also comment on the balancing service provider role, the BSP role, that we are, from Svenska kraftnät point of view, really, we really want the independent BSP role as well. Now it's actually at the Swedish regulator to decide on how that model will really look like, but we have proposed an independent BSP, so to say. So we're on the same page there. So that was one thing. The services, when you say that you provide them like day ahead and such, you need to know that you have the capacity markets and energy markets for the understanding. So the capacity market, that's where you procure the availability, but then in the energy market, which is up to a couple of minutes before real time, that's where you actually procure the energy, just for the understanding. That's different markets.
Good point. Yeah. Okay. Okay, 10 seconds to Jonas.
Sorry. I think we need long-term incentive, how to incentivize these balancing resources, as well as long-term regulation.
Okay. That's a good summary, or good saying in this topic. And I would like to maybe ask the floor for. I think we have only time for like one question, but if you have one, so please have a good one. You have the experts here, so yes, Kalle. Yeah.
I'll have a first cut at it if that's okay. And so I agree. I think one of the phrases we've been using at home now in Ireland is a balanced portfolio is what's needed. And it really is like there's a phrase we use as well, sometimes horses for courses, which is kind of different horses will suit different courses. And it's the same with technologies, you know, and certain technologies will be very good at providing fast frequency response. Others might be better at kind of longer energy kind of provision type of services. I think while we've looked at 2030, when you talk about 2050 and net zero, and where we get our energy from and how we manage long periods without wind, etc., they're kind of future challenges that are going to need to be solved. So it's about all the states you've mentioned, but there's a whole range of other issues that are going to have to be thought about as we look out to kind of net zero in the future. But it is about a balanced portfolio, I suppose, is what I would say, to be able to manage all those different scenarios, even if they're rare, because we have to be able to manage them all. Yeah.
Okay, that's a very good question, Kalle. I mean, now we focused on how to keeping the lights on, but it's another question to getting the lights on if you if you lose the power, as one example in what you said. But I think we need to be aware of time here and thank the panel and the organizers and all people listening online and live here and so on and so forth. And then we continue the dialogue in the mingling part here of the morning. So thank you all for joining. I don't know, do we need to say anything from the hosts, or otherwise we just clap the hand and thanks to everyone.